18 months of secret negotiations produce a bad deal for the Cuban people. While it may have been done with the best of intentions, in my view, we've compromised bedrock principles for virtually no concessions.
Well, that is Democrat Robert Menendez, the senior senator from New Jersey, expressing concerns at yesterday's Senate Foreign Relations Committee. The hearing there, understanding the impact of U.S. policy changes on human rights and democracy in Cuba. Miranda, a whole lot of people on both sides of the aisle are wondering if what's going on now with the reestablishment of diplomatic relations with Cuba is going to be a good thing.
Yeah, well, as it turns out, as the talks continue, the first pictures in months of Fidel Castro have now surfaced at his home in his wheelchair with his wife at his side. We'll try to show you those in a moment. He was being interviewed by a Cuban student. There you go. By a Cuban student that Fidel invited personally. There you have it. Those are new images of Fidel Castro looking, older, but still healthy.
Well, he's got those whiskers, and rumors of his demise must be greatly exaggerated. But what happens in a country like Cuba, the timing of the release of those pictures with that purpose in mind, or just a coincidence? Let's go further in depth now as we welcome back Newsmax.com managing editor Alina Hernandez via Skype. Alina, Senator Menendez has always been a hawk on Cuba, and he doesn't hesitate to let his displeasure be known with this administration. Is this a breach that can be healed?
I think that right now what we're seeing is the very early beginnings of talks. I think that it's a little bit early to say that the administration has gained nothing. I mean, I think at minimum, they've gotten the Cubans to sit down and have a conversation about how to normalize relations. I think the bulk of the American people disagree with Senator Menendez. That this is not a good thing for Americans. I mean, I think there's a poll that was released today. More than 60% of Americans favor normalizing relations. I think we can't let up on things like human rights, access to the internet, freedom for the Cuban people to start businesses, to be able to travel freely, to be able to join forces and make plans for their future, free elections. Those things are going to be on the table, I think, much later on in these negotiations.
So, Alina, I want to get your opinion. Do you think the release of these images that we were just showing a few moments ago, do you think they have any impact on negotiations between Cuba and America?
I don't believe so. These are timed more than anything for, I think, a Miami audience. There's always rumors. There were rumors about 2 weeks ago that Fidel was really frail, that he was on his deathbed. The Miami exile community has had Fidel Castro on his deathbed more times than I can possibly count. So I think this is more to let people know that he's still here, he's still active, he's still a functional part of this administration, of this regime, even though he is not no longer the, quote unquote president of Cuba.
So it's not so much the photos of Fidel, but Alina, I have to ask you about Raul's list. Now, you cited poll numbers, and in the abstract, people can go, yeah, diplomatic relations are a good thing. But when Raul Castro puts out a list of demands so outrageous that it angers people more than just in Miami's Cuban community, seems to me that you have to question, does Raul think that he basically has carte blanche with Mr. Obama in the White House?
I think Raul was speaking to a summit of Latin American nations, and in that context, that audience expects to hear a lot of tough talk. I think Raul, for publicity's sake, has to take a hard line, make demands. They've been asking for Gitmo since 1959. They've been asking for payment for the damage that the embargo has caused pretty much since the inception of the embargo. This is what Raul has to do to hold on to power and not to lose face among the hardliners in his own regime. So in reality, the negotiations that are happening with top diplomats from both nations are much more simplistic. It's all about what agenda are we going to try to set? When are we going to be able to open embassies in each other's countries? How will we get goods and mail in and out? Will the Cubans have access to the U.S. Embassy? We are right now at the bottom floor of negotiations. But I think the leadership, particularly in Cuba, it's all about posturing. I think the Americans are well aware that that's what they're doing.
Alina, will this ever benefit the Cuban people?
I don't see a benefit to the Cuban people immediately, but I think long term, the benefit of a social exchange, of free travel, hopefully of things like enhanced internet access, that alone will help the Cuban people tremendously. The Cuban people are essentially living still in the 1960s when it comes to technology and when it comes to, access to information. So I think that alone is a huge impact for the Cuban people if we can negotiate that.
And as you were mentioning the time warp involving the island nation of Cuba, Alina, we see some video and some of the old style late 50s cars from the United States that I guess takes some ingenuity on the part of the mechanics to utilize. Let me go past posturing to actions that could be taken. We've got about a minute 15 left. There are suggestions that even as you talk about these low-level negotiations, that Mr. Obama, as president, wants to bring Raul Castro to the United States for a Rose Garden ceremony. Is it likely the president will leapfrog all these basic negotiations and Raul Castro will have a propaganda victory back home and internationally in the Rose Garden?
I don't think President Obama would do that in this. I don't see that happening in this administration. I don't think Barack Obama wants to be tied so closely to that regime. I think he understands the economic benefits. I think that he recognizes that there's going to be some benefits to the Cuban people. I don't see that happening anytime soon.
Well, we'll hold on to that video, Alina, because not much surprises me out of this White House. Tell you what, Alina, stay right there. When we come back from political science to legitimate science and to skepticism involving science, Nick Tate and Bob Walker will be with us. Alina comes back. You do too. Right now, step aside for an update.